This broadcast of Cultural Caravan is paid for by Cultural Caravan Productions, Incorporated.
My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition, we will continue our conversation, but this time with a focus on the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we're joined by our distinguished panel, and also to my left, and also my co-host for this afternoon's event is I call him the Doctor of the Airwaves, Professor Basir Mchawi. He is the WBAI radio host of Education at the Crossroads, now celebrating its 25th year. Welcome. And next to him is the second Assistant President General of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. I call him, even though I call him Professor Raymond Dugue, but he is Brother Raymond Dugue, no stranger to our airways. Welcome back. Okay. And next to him is a brother who has served the community for many decades, and he is the co-founder of CEMOTAP, Brother Dr. James McIntosh. Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Dr. Segun Shabaka. He is the chairman of the New York chapter of the NACO, the National Association of Kawaida Organizations, as well as the chairman of the International African Arts Festival. Welcome back, all you. Welcome back. So, continuing with our conversation of the impact, as well as, and as we're now into year 2021, and looking at the life and legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I would like for you each to really reflect on what you feel some of the greatest, one of the greatest contributions that Dr. King has made to our collective community and worldwide. I'm going to skip intentionally over you, Brother Basir. We're going to come back. Brother Raymond.
Oh, thank you for having me. When I think of Dr. King and his accomplishments, I start basically, I would say like around 1965, June specifically. He does a 3-day trip. He visits Jamaica, he visits Kingston, he speaks at UWI, but when he visits the gravesite of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, he says, Mr. Garvey is the first man of color, the first Negro to allow our people to believe in themselves. He gave us one destiny, one goal, and for that, we will always cherish. Now, continuing, that's 65. In 67, April 4th, 1967, he comes to New York. That's when he talks about Vietnam. He talks about the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is the United States of America. This is my remembrance of Dr. King. And then continuing, May 10, 1967, what does he talk about? He mentions the 3 evils, the evils of racism, the evils of poverty, and the evils of war. And then finally, the night before he's killed, you know what he says? Bank in. He says, black people, guess what? Nobody's coming to our rescue. Take your money out of these banks, create your own banks, pool your resources, do what you can to uplift yourself. So when I think of Dr. King, these are the things that I think of. I don't think of anything else. And especially since he gave great praise and honor to the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
Okay, well, I think my memories or recollections of Dr. King and what his accomplishments were, number one, I agree with Brother Raymond, the impact he had on the whole world when he declared that violence in Vietnam was, if you believed in nonviolence here, then you should be nonviolent in Vietnam. I mean, he basically echoed Malcolm X on that one. I think that was a courageous step. So I admire him for his courage. I think his strategy of civil disobedience, it's not the same as, I'm from South Carolina. I mean, to do those things in the South where lynching was still very active, very courageous. I think that his organizational ability and his ability as a strategist, those are things to be admired. And I think that when I say strategist, I mean boycotting, civil disobedience, those things changed. And although his goals may be different from some of our goals, he achieved those goals. And that's what you have to give him credit for. And at the same time, his ability to change over the years, his ability to incorporate some of the things that Malcolm was saying, to incorporate some of the things that the young people, like Stokely Carmichael, AKA Kwame Ture, to incorporate them into his thinking and actions. Those are some of the things that I really admire him for and remember him for.
I think he represents, as a representative of Black people, the moral conscience of this society. Even from his earliest organizing with the Montgomery Improvement Association, it is phenomenal that he had Black people for over a year in unity did not get on those buses. And they pooled their resources so people still got to work, still got to their destinations, but they did not support that system. And from that, the movement spread across the South with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Again, taking that movement on a wider level. And he understood early, really, about what the society owed Black people when he said, which has been misnomered, I have a dream. Really, he was saying, I have an uncashed check. You owe me, America, because I have a check that I have not been able to cash. And so we had to re-listen to his speeches and his writings. Letter from a Birmingham jail, from chaos to community. I mean, he was a really comprehensive thinker. And when you look at it, he did really, his infusion into the movement was reluctant. He was, E.D. Nixon picked him because E.D. Nixon said, these other people that have been here, they'll sell us out for a suit. And he said, Martin Luther King needs to lead this movement. Martin Luther King just got there from college. He really didn't even want to go to Atlanta, from what I understand, because he was trying to, have a more laid-back position. But he was thrust into that leadership, and he met it. He met that challenge, and no telling where he would have went. People like to make a distinction between him and Malcolm, but it wasn't really that wide a distinction, and the dominant culture knew that. That's why they erased both of them.
Well, we've been talking to an extent about what we would have to say the radical vision of Dr. King. Why is this society obsessed with the pacifist vision of Dr. King and not that radical vision?
Oh, it's simple. It's what I would call the center classification of our leaders. Basically what was tried on Nelson Mandela. Anything. If you are an oppressor, if you're a colonizer, if you're an enslaver, you never ever want the people you're colonizing, the people you're oppressing, the people you're enslaving to ever be free. So you create in your image whom you want for them to praise and honor. So they go out of their ways to show us, to talk to us about Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. But guess what? in May of 1967, he says it was a nightmare, and he explains why. So they really go out of their ways to always pacify us, to always make us believe. And even when we have heroes, it's heroes that they create for us. Oh, that's simple as that.
Oh, okay. You know, they excerpt out of his statements those that they want to highlight. They excerpt out of his behaviors those things that they want to highlight, and it's strategic. They do that because that's to their advantage, to have our people believe that those are the things that that he said and did. But I've taken his statements and put them on cards, and took statements of Malcolm and put them on cards, and in front of an audience asked them to identify who said which, and people couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. There were things he said about Africa that they thought it was Malcolm that said it. There were things that he said in terms of confrontation they thought Malcolm had said, and you know, and vice versa. There are things that Malcolm has said that they would have thought that Dr. King was saying.
I think I would agree with both of what's been said, both of the brothers, and simply say that it's all about controlling our consciousness, controlling our awareness, because if you can get people to think in a certain way, then you have modified, if not controlled, their actions that they will take. But King was a radical. He was a radical, you know, and he was for the transformation of this society. He was against the militarism. He was against capitalism. He said those things, you know.
Now, if I may interject, why do you feel people felt it was so important not to play up the radical, that side of King? Why is it that just the dreamer is the only side that we see? I'm just asking you that question, Doctor.
Because if you take his radical elements, he's talking about a radical transformation of society. They want a gradual, if not take you backward to the plantation mentality. So he was talking about radical transformation. That's why they don't want you to understand him. He was not talking about just these new ideas. He was talking about a new way to conceive and change this society and this world, because this society, as a major purveyor of violence, even today, America, if you put all the major arms dealers, nations that are dealing in arms together, America outflanks them. Okay? America has its tentacles all over the world. It's talking about Russia doing this and Russia doing that and China doing this and China doing that. America has been doing this for a century or more in terms of imperialist domination. And so King saw all of that, and he was for changing that.
At the end of Dr. King's life, he was engaged in the Poor People's Campaign. So at that point, Dr. King had determined that economics was important to our people. It was not just in regards to the right to vote, but there were economic considerations that we needed to have. How do you see that now?
Thank you for asking that. Brother Basir, you know, I'm coming from the UNIA perspective. You know, you've got culture, you've got economics, and you've got society. And when I say society, I'm talking politics. These are the three pillars of the society. In the UNIA, we believe that economics, and when we say economics, we mean the independent, self-reliant economics. That has to come before the culture, and it has to come before the politics, because with that, you control everything. So we fully embrace and agree with Dr. King once he made that major push towards economics. And, you know, and right before he was assassinated, he was even advocating, take your monies out of these banks that don't produce anything for you, that discriminate against you. Create your, if there is no black bank, then go create it. Pool your resources. So, Brother Basir, we fully embrace that. We agree it must be. And when we say economics, we're talking about an independent, self-reliant economics. And I could even extend it to say, based on looking out for your people first, your community. So I agree with Dr. King all the way on that.
Well, I think that he was about economics all along. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Montgomery boycott, you know, he was basically showing you how to take down a powerful economic entity through a certain amount of discipline and with courage. The question you asked before relates to this in that a lot of what he did is being defined by the mass media. So when they said he was a part of a nonviolent movement, that was the most violent movement in the history of this country. I mean, their houses were getting blown up. People were getting blown up. People were getting lynched. People were getting shot. It's just that all the casualties were on both sides. We don't know where he was going. You know, a wise general can make a move that even his closest confidant doesn't know anything about. But if you look at it, what better way to train an army than to have people face the enemy with no weapons and take everything they dish out? I'm not advising this, but I'm saying, but think about it. At the end of that, you have people that are totally unafraid of this other person. Now, if you arm them, you got a problem. You have a real problem. You have a problem like at Dien Bien Phu when the Vietnamese would throw themselves on with explosives onto the barbed wire, or throw themselves on for their compatriots to run over the top of it. So, you know, I'm saying that this idea that he wasn't involved or thinking about it, I think he was thinking about a lot of things that he didn't share with people. And the thing that was so much smarter about him than some people is that he took what the people believed in, and that was the idiom or the medium in which he worked. He worked, you know, some people think, well, because there's so many contradictions in the Bible, you should leave that alone. But he took the Bible and he took those contradictions and used them to radicalize people.
Let's say one of the shortfalls of the boycott was not to attempt to build an independent bus movement themselves. Okay, that might have been even the attempt, given all the oppression and things that were being heaped upon them. Just the attempt and the fight from that angle on would have been a very, I think, a comprehensive vision. I think that I'm not sure if there was a comprehensive vision around economics, given that they were dealing with such an oppressive and brutal, violent society and culture. I mean, just think the violence that existed into the 60s and 70s and even today, just around the right to vote. And they knew, because our people knew coming out of the Holocaust of slavery, they wanted three things. Land, economic power, education, knowledge, and then the right to vote. Those are three major issues still confronting our people today. And so this is why we talk about culture in a comprehensive sense, because everything is really connected. You know, you have the Black church. Black church is a political entity, it's an economic entity, it's a cultural, social entity where a lot of the artists come out of the Black church. Music. And so for centuries, if not decades, the only place where Black people could gather in this country was in groups of more than 2 or 3 was in the church. And so the power that the Black church has and limits in how it uses and exerts is something to discuss and talk about. But the church, now you have the mosques and other religious institutions that they need to step up and understand the power they have, because they have people there that are all of these different things. They're voters, they're business, they're doing business, they're spending money, they're educators or being educated. So, you know, we have to see this struggle in a broad sense.
Now, you raised an excellent point in terms of several things, in terms of what when Dr. King was on the scene, we were unified with the understanding of who was the enemy of our freedom. He was able to galvanize people because they were coming from the same church, the same reality. We now, several decades later, are in a situation where people have moved from that we-ism mindset that existed during King's time to more of a me-ism concept. What do you feel would be the most productive way of us to really build upon, celebrate the legacy of Dr. King in this society today?
I think the important thing is, as we've been saying, is for people to understand the depth and breadth of Dr. King and who he was. I think the problem is people are stuck in a version of Dr. King which is not consistent with who he actually is. That radical vision of Dr. King is what our people need to actually go ahead and recognize. And if they see that, then it will inspire them. Because we are here, we just experienced an election in which people voted who previously, if we were back in 1963, they would not have been able to vote. There's still, of course, issues in regards to voter suppression, but we understand that there's been some progress in that particular field based upon what Dr. King has brought us.
It's pretty simple what we need to do. Basically, follow the philosophy of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Embrace one God, one aim, one destiny. When you embrace one God, there is no distinction. When you embrace one aim, you know what the aim is and the destiny is. So to honor Dr. King, towards the end, or what we call the radical version, is the economics, the coming together, and realizing nobody's coming to our rescue. And where we live, he mentioned, is the greatest purveyor of violence. I don't think that has changed. So, and to quote Adam Clayton Powell Jr., what's in your hands? We have it, Black people. We can control it. Look at it. We voted to elect someone. We may not get anything out of it, but the point is, it's in our hands.
Well, I think that what Brother Basir said with respect to educating yourself to whom he really was, as opposed to what the media and mass media has told you he is, that's the first step. Because how can you follow someone's legacy if you don't even know what their legacy is? I think that that different people have to do different things. I think that organizers have to look at some of the strategic things that he did to get so many people behind him. We have people that they like to organize on the thing that's most alien to the minds of our people. Something, they'll find some esoteric thing and try to force people, like with a sledgehammer, to get behind that. When King took things that everybody knew was wrong. You know what I'm trying to say? There were things that anybody could look at and you could see that this is wrong. Of course, more people are going to gather with you, but don't misunderstand it. Very few people, relatively speaking, actually got on the front lines with him and did those things. A lot of people supported it and believed in it, but there's always going to be only a small amount of people that are going to actually get out there and do what's necessary to do.
And I would say, as Nkrumah said, which he was quoting actually from Chinese in their struggle for freedom, go to the people, start with what they know, build on what they have. We have to see this as in King's vision of freedom. Freedom from want, toil, domination, freedom to be in an environment and in a culture, society that allows for the massive flourishing of us as individuals and people in community. And so this struggle for freedom demands a struggle for change in this society, because it's society, not just individuals. Society puts us in conditions that don't allow for us to flourish. Sekou Touré said, we are like seeds as human beings. Depending on the conditions we are put into depends on our capacity to grow, develop, and flourish. And so Black people are consciously, by this dominant, racist, oppressive society, put in conditions. Our communities, you know that people living in states of domination and oppression and just poverty and miseducation, that they cannot flourish. And so we have to fight to change these conditions, and we have to get people who are most victimized of those conditions to realize that they have to fight, because it's not for them, it's for their progeny. And so this means, going back to the Benjamins, the Black middle class has to stop pursuing its class interests over the mass interests. It has to begin to think about what is happening to the masses. That I was just listening to Martin Luther King yesterday, and he was saying that people in those, going back to what I said about people don't care about other people suffering in society. He was talking about the Black middle class coming out of the backwaters, getting into the clear waters, and don't care about what's happening no more in the backwaters. And so Black people in the middle class need to start thinking, because King committed class suicide, Garvey committed class suicide, Malcolm committed class suicide. They began to put their resources into the masses. They didn't just pursue their economic interests. They pursued the interests and sacrificed themselves for the interests of the masses of Black people. This is what Dr. Karenga talks about, and this is what Amilcar Cabral talked about.
Well, I thank you, because that was really a great way to cap off a really thought-provoking conversation. And I want to first of all thank you all for once again joining us, and thank you for co-hosting, Brother Basir and everyone. And certainly this is an ongoing conversation, and one that we will engage our audience in. But with that said, I just want to say I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. And please visit our website at www.ccptv.org. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.
This broadcast of Cultural Caravan is paid for by Cultural Caravan Productions Incorporated.